Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This presentation is part of the ISSRM virtual conference and the session on recreation and public lands in the U.S., organized by Wade Morse. My name is Monica Darian, and I'm a research social scientist with the U.S. Forest Service's Pacific Northwest Research Station. The research I'm presenting today is about desired settings, activities, and barriers to access for walkers in an organization that serves African American women. I've done this work in collaboration with Lee Cerveny, also with the PNW Research Station, Trina Baker from Girl Trek, and Allie Tripp from Washington Trails Association. This collaboration is motivated by research conducted over many decades about inequities in our systems of public lands, particularly in how they serve non-white populations. This includes where public lands are located, what infrastructure is there, what activities are allowed, who visits them, and what they do there, and fundamentally, how they became public in the first place. This affects the wide range of intangible and tangible benefits that public land experiences have the potential to offer people. Some of this research has focused on practical issues such as transportation, while others have focused on perceptions and experiences of discrimination and safety. Others have focused on cultural relevancy and the organizational barriers within natural resource agencies that are not as racially or ethnically diverse as the publics that they serve. Many have highlighted the historical and social and ecological and political processes that have resulted in the models and discourses we have about what kinds of activities, what kinds of people, and what kinds of places belong where. Building on these insights, Lee and I came to this collaborative with these general research questions in mind. Questions about developing methods for learning about and learning from and learning with different groups, the sorts of tools that are engaging and effective in different situations, and how these activities can be adapted for different settings and different groups. This project wasn't just about research, though. We addressed organizational questions and interests brought by our project partners, Girl Trek, which is a national public health organization that fosters local communities of walkers among African American women, Washington Trails Association, which is a statewide organization that mobilizes hikers and trail stewards, and the PNW Research Station, which conducts research related to people, natural resources, and the environment. We came together to ensure that what we would learn would be mutually beneficial to our individual organizations. We began with joining weekly Girl Trek walks in Everett, Renton, and Seattle, where we could learn informally about the organization and people's experiences with walking with the group. Then we conducted interviews with walk leaders, and having some familiarity now with the different groups, we developed the framework for the workshops, which I'll spend most of my time talking about today. We also had the opportunity to try out our workshop activities in another context, which I'll briefly describe. And then finally, this spring and summer, we're sharing our findings within and across our networks. We designed our 2 workshops that we held in Seattle and Tacoma with 4 main phases. First, a walk, then a listing and prioritizing activity, then a sorting activity, and finally a group mapping activity. And I'll tell you more about each of these phases next. We started with a walk that began and ended at our workshop location. And this was really important for recruiting participants and also building rapport within our group as we got to know each other. Then we engaged in a listing activity in which we asked participants to share the benefits they'd experienced from walking with Girl Trek and added to it as a group until we agreed that the list was exhaustive. Then we worked as a group to categorize these benefits, and we gave participants each 3 stickers and asked them to put them next to the benefits that were most important to them. Then we looked at these results and talked about them as a group. In the sorting phase, we gave participants a stack of 32 cards that had social, environmental, and infrastructure characteristics of places where they might walk. And we asked them to sort the cards into 4 buckets that were labeled critical, nice to have, doesn't matter, and avoid. After everyone had sorted their cards, we talked about what stood out to them, what cards were missing, and what really rose to the top in their decisions about where they would walk. Finally, we did a mapping activity. We gave participants 2 colors of stickers, and we asked them to place one color on places where they had walked and the other on places that they would like to walk in the future. Then we all looked at the maps together and talked about what might help people get to some of these places that they had identified as not having walked but being interested in, and what they liked about the places where they currently walked. We added a bonus activity for the Tacoma workshop. While we were walking together, we stopped and asked everyone to think for a moment about the way they felt in that very moment. And we passed around sticky notes and markers and asked everyone to jot down a few words to represent their feelings in that moment. Later, when we were inside, we asked participants to sort all of these feelings on the wall together to show how all these thoughts and emotions fit together conceptually. We thought we'd share first our 3 main content related findings, and then I'll share 3 of our main process related findings. So first, we learned from our workshop participants how important organized groups are in motivating and empowering, and how they serve as ambassadors in the places where they walk. This is something we heard about in different ways in the listing, sorting, and mapping activities. We heard about the importance of sisterhood and shared experiences, and how welcoming new people and showing them their places was really important to Girl Trek. We also heard about the role of the group in making new walks seem more accessible to people, and this was especially important for the walk leaders. Our second key finding was about safety. As you can see in this chart of the attributes that participants sorted, safety was foundational to decisions of where to walk, and attributes related to perceived safety, such as cell coverage and lighting and the presence of others and good visibility, were essential and to many participants. And when we looked at what people tended to avoid, we see safety wrapped up in some of these other attributes too, such as busy intersections and dogs on the trail. And these show our Seattle and Tacoma workshops together in one place. Our third key finding was about the availability of the kinds of information and insights participants wanted to have before going to a new location to walk. They talked about wanting to know what it's like, really what to expect in a really experiential way. In the sorting and mapping activities, participants talked about not being able to discern these sorts of things from readily available information. These insights were especially helpful for Washington Trails Association, which hosts an extensive hiking guide and trip reporting platform, and thinking about the sorts of information they present and encourage others to, in their crowdsourcing of information, to include in their trip reports. Moving along to our public engagement insights. The first is that our process was possible and successful because of our harnessing of our mutual interests. And it causes us to think through the ways that we think about and talk about some of these topics. For example, Girl Trek organizes around concepts of walking, and sisterhood, and self-care. They don't see themselves as a recreation organization, as it says on their webpage here. WTA organizes around concepts of hiking and protecting trails. And the research team that I'm part of is the People and Natural Resources team. When does a walk become a hike? Do people think about the trail in their neighborhood as a natural resource? The answers to these questions might be less important than the prompt to consider the ways that our language practices may unintentionally exclude others. Our second public engagement insight is about how valuable it was for us to spend time with Girl Trekkers in their familiar places and be part of their rituals. For example, one walk I joined had a mental health theme. And so one walker throughout the walk shared her experience with violence and trauma and how Girl Trek had helped, and how walking with Girl Trek had helped throughout the entire experience. The whole group stopped at a spot along the water and had a moment of quiet and reflection and prayer. And in the quote I've included on this slide, a walk leader references this shared experience in terms of this feeling of immersion in natural environments. And it really emphasizes that experiences of nature are social and cultural, and you really need to understand the whole context to understand any of it. Finally, our mapping activity created palpable energy and interest among the groups. It seemed to serve two important purposes. First, for in the moment learning and reflection, as people helped each other find places and asked each other questions about places they had marked. The visual of the maps, once everyone had placed their stickers, prompted dialogue and people observing patterns and really celebrating Girl Trek's presence across the map. It's also helpful for identifying new opportunities and places to walk. And from a research perspective, it raises the potential for spatial analyses for activities with larger numbers of participants. Which brings me to our next slide. One of our workshop participants was involved in organizing the Refuge Outdoor Festival, which is a 3-day camping event for people of color and allies. She invited us to try out some of these activities with a different audience and in a different setting. And I won't go too far into detail on this, there isn't time, but just a few observations. For the tabling event, we had 3 activities. First, a simplified mapping activity. Second, a sorting activity in which participants sorted a deck of cards that each had a different outdoor activity on them into 4 buckets, representing activities that they currently did, ones they used to do, ones they would like to try, and ones that they weren't interested in. Third, we adapted our activity of sorting environmental and social attributes into a sticker board with 4 columns in which you can see on the right. And each participant was given a sheet of stickers that they sorted into those 4 columns. A few quick insights from the tabling version of these activities. First, having great table mates helps. You can see here that we shared a table with colleagues from the nearby national forest and national parks who were handing out posters and maps and stickers, and they helped to attract and funnel participants our way. We had to simplify and adjust activities to be more table friendly. It's a trade-off, but it's really necessary for this context. And it seemed even more important to let people see each other's responses. Even though we weren't engaging in the dialogue that we fostered in the workshop format, people seemed really interested in seeing where others, in places where others had marked on the map, and how they had sorted their attributes in that on that poster board. We certainly will have more polished professional materials in the future. The sand pails drew some questions, and we worked with the office supplies we had for this back in time when we were in offices. And finally, it's more challenging to package insights. The Refuge Outdoor Festival brought a lot of different groups together, which was really exciting for our purposes, but it also meant that we didn't have one group that we could easily package our findings from and report back to. Our ongoing research questions for this work include continuing to consider the adaptability and scalability of these activities for different groups and in different environments. We also have an interest in figuring out ways to more systematically gather qualitative data, such as stories, to better understand some of the cultural models and relationships with nature and attitudes towards management practices that people hold. We'd also like to be able to package and share activities and tools with organizations and land managers who'd like to learn more about their members and constituents. On the organizational side, I think future research partnerships such as this one are really ripe for internal learning as well as learning on a broader scale. And I think there's an opportunity to help us all be more informed and thoughtful in developing resources and communications so that they collectively serve all segments of our diverse public. With that, I'll say thank you to our partners, all of our participants, and WTA for funding. I'd also like to thank the virtual audience for your attention, and I encourage you all to come by our session Q&A.